the Liberty Podcast with Clint Armitage. We are proclaiming liberty one show at a time, and the next one starts right now. Yeah, you know who it is. It's Clint Armitage with the Liberty Podcast. Got another one for you. And you know how Proverbs 16:9 says this? It says, "In their hearts humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps." Well, that has come true again because I had plans to finish up this Matthew series to chapter 7, right? And this would have been the start of chapter 7, but God came back again and let me know, hey, talk about numbers again. So just like he did last time, he had me pivot and talk about numbers, the pattern of 2. Well, now we're talking about numbers. It's actually the number 6, and we're going to talk about more numbers than that in other episodes here. But this episode is going to be the number 6, and we're going to be talking about Noah as well. So we're going back to Genesis chapter 6. All right. So that's what we're going to be talking about this episode here. So thanks for coming by. So in Genesis 6, I'll go ahead and read that or read portions of it and break it down, and then also talk about some stuff that it's talking about, and then relating it to the numbers, to the number 6. Okay. All right, here we go. Chapter 6, verse 1, about the flood. When man began to increase in number on the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Then the Lord said, "My spirit will not contend with man forever, for he is mortal. His days will be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of men and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown." All right, let's stop there in verse 4. Okay, so first thing we're going to talk about in relation to the number 6 is the fact that Genesis 6 is number 6. And okay, so this isn't the strongest connection here to God's biblical numbers and the number 6, but I wanted to add it in because it's interesting nonetheless. So Genesis 6 is actually the chapter that God basically creates or has displays the fact that man sins is getting to him, and he's going to wipe out the earth because of their sin. So, it's kind of like the first, time he's talking about wiping out the earth and because of man's sin. And so Genesis chapter 6 talks about that. The number 6 is actually the number of man. All right, and I'll get into that more a little bit later, but it basically is related to man and not like the spiritual side of man necessarily. It's more like man's sin, man's wickedness, man's flesh, spiritlessness, sin, like I said, sin, earthly thinking, earthly systems, human nature, toil, like work, labor that came into the world because of sin, the curse of toil because of the sin. So it relates to man, but man's sin basically, and his human nature, not his spiritual nature per se. So that's kind of it. The number 6 meaning man. So if you remember back in Genesis 1 in verse 24 to 26. That's when the Bible lists that man was created. Well, he was also created on the 6th day. So if you go back to Genesis 1, starting verse 24, you will see that God created man on the 6th day. So again, the number 6 relating to man, but his kind of birth, his earthliness of man. Now, also, the number 6, we talked about toil, right? Man's toil being in relation to the number 6. Well, Adam's curse, when sin entered the world and basically we were fallen at that point, Adam's curse and mankind's curse for men was toil after the fall, okay? And again, it was set, and toil meaning work, right? It was set at 6 days of labor. So if you notice, God worked for 6 days. He attached that curse to the curse of work or toil, labor, to man after sin, and he set it at 6 days, 6 days of labor, and then the 7th day is rest. Well, so we have 6 days of work, which relates to the toil, which relates to the fall and to man, right? So number 6 relates to that kind of stuff. Also, it also kind of is the basis, that 6 days of labor is the basis of the Shemitah, which is the Jewish, observance that they observe on not only a weekly basis, but also a a year kind of basis, 6 years. So what the Sabbath is the seventh day, right? That's when God rested, the Sabbath. Well, 6 days of labor, and then you're supposed to rest. Well, 6 years of work, and then you're supposed to rest a year, or the land is supposed to lay fallow for a year. Well, that's the Shemitah. The Shemitah is the observance after the 6th year. And then it goes into the 7th year of rest, okay? And so in Hebrew, that's related to number 6 as well, which is related to man's toil again. And also the Hebrew slaves, when you were a slave as a Hebrew, you were to be released after 6 years of being a slave. Okay, that was the Lord's, basically rule that you had to be released after 6 years, or the option to be released, because you could stay if you wanted to. But after 6 years, you were to be released. So that's kind of the whole 6-year thing related to toil. And again, that relates to man's sin and all that. So it's all related to the flesh and to things that are not spiritual. It's more on the human nature side of things. Okay. So that's that. That's the number 6 and why we're talking about that and how it relates to Genesis chapter 6, talking about the flood. And like I said earlier, in verse 5 here, we're going to start here. God talks about man's wickedness. Okay, so let's get into that. Verse 5 in Genesis chapter 6. The Lord saw how great man's wickedness on the earth had become, and that every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil all the time. The Lord was grieved that he had made man on the earth, and his heart was filled with pain. So the Lord said, I will wipe mankind, whom I have created, from the face of the earth, men and animals and creatures that move along the ground and birds of the air. For I am grieved that I had made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. Okay, that's the end of chapter 8. So I'm actually going to back up just a little bit more. We're going to talk about, go back to chapter 2. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention this earlier. Verse 2. Verse 2 talked about the sons of God. And people are kind of confused on what the sons of God means. Well, there are different schools of thought, I guess you could say, about what the sons of God means. Some people say that the sons of God in this case here mean the line of Seth. Okay. And then it goes on because it says right there in verse 2, sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful and they married any of them they chose. Okay. So they say, it's the line of Seth, and, the daughters of men were beautiful and they married them. Well, another indication in the words used there in the sons of God is actually used in other passages as well. In, the phrase sons of God is used in Job chapter 1, verse 6, chapter 2, verse 1, chapter 38, verse 7. And the translators of the Septuagint, the Greek, translated sons of God as angels. Okay. So angels. And that's kind of my belief here is where this comes from, to me, in my estimation, is that the sons of God means angels. And that's the other belief here. The other school of thought is that the sons of God means angels. And so it says that if it were angels, the angels saw that the daughters of men were beautiful and they married any of them they chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit will not contend with man forever, for he is mortal and his days will be 120 years. Okay. So God didn't like what he saw there. That's why I think it is angels, because he didn't like what he saw, because the angels were coming down. And these are fallen angels. These are not God's angels like Michael and Gabriel, because they, in the New Testament, it talks about how, I think Jesus said this, that the angels do not marry. Well, yeah, the good angels don't. And here it talks about the sons of God being angels, but it's the fallen angels, I believe, that came down and married women and had kids with them. And when they had kids, they were called the Nephilim, right? In verse 4, it talks about the Nephilim were on the earth in these days and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of men and had children by them. Okay, again, the sons of God being angels. So the Lord said he will not contend with them forever. And then he said his days will be 120 years. And for a long time, I thought that 120 years was actually like man could not live past 120. And then, you look at today's ages of people, very, very few people live over 100. When you see someone at 104, 110, 114, I think someone did live to 114 or something. Actually, not too long in the past here, 114 years old, and they passed away. Well, that's what I thought it meant for a long time, until I kind of did a little bit of research and found out it's actually 120 years from that point until the flood came. So basically what God was doing was giving people 120 years to repent and change their ways. And he used Noah as the prophet or the preacher to help them, find their way. But they didn't listen, obviously. And that's why the flood came and destroyed everything and everybody and the whole earth. So that 120 days right there is not related to how long man will live in general. It's related to how long he gave man to live from that point until the flood came. All right. So that was kind of interesting because I did not realize that. And then it says the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and afterward, they basically married and had kids with the daughters of men or women on earth here. And so again, the Nephilim are translated like giants, fallen. Those are different translations, and it's not real 100% clear what they were, but we know by the text here, it's basically the offspring of the sons of God with the daughters of men. These are the offsprings. Well, they're supposedly giants, okay? And so coming from, these fallen angels and women, and then having kids, okay? And that's the Nephilim. Now, something about the Nephilim, not only being the offsprings of the sons of God and the daughters of men, we could go into all kinds of stuff in terms of the Nephilim, but one thing is, people wonder, like, why would, angels, fallen angels, like, have relations with women of earth? Well, it says that they thought they were beautiful, right? So they were basically lusting after these women on earth here. Again, fallen angels. Well, they also could be demon-possessed men as well. But again, that's fallen angels, demons getting into men, and then men, possessing them, and then, getting with the daughters of men, which is, women of the earth. But either way, people wonder, like, why would they do that? Well, if you think about it, although it's not necessarily biblical because it's not in the biblical text, but it is plausible. It could happen. The reason could be the devil and his demons wanted to stop the line or taint the line of the human race so that Jesus, the seed, could not be born of a woman, because Jesus was born with no sin. And if the line or the human race was filled with demon-possessed people, then they could attempt to stop Jesus from being born. That could have been the reason. Now, again, it's not in the biblical text, so, you can't say 100% that that's the reason, but, it is possible that was the reason. Okay, so he says here in verse 5, the Lord saw how great man's wickedness was on the earth and had become, and every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil all the time. Now, the Lord, he was grieved that he had made man on earth. And his heart was filled with pain, like it says there. So the Lord says he's going to wipe mankind out, wipe out the earth, men, animals, everything, because of that reason. Because he was kind of regretting the fact that he had made people, because they were wicked. What does it say here? It says, let me use the words here. They were, they had become, and every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil all the time. Only evil all the time. So you can see how God was, sad about this whole thing and wanted to start over because, all these people were wicked, except Noah. He found he found favor because in the eyes of the Lord, Noah was a righteous man. And there you go. Let's read verse 9 here. It says, this is the account of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked with God. Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight and was full of violence. God saw how corrupt the earth had become, for all the people on the earth had corrupted their ways. So God said to Noah, I'm going to put an end to all the people, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. I am surely going to destroy both of them and the earth. So make yourself an ark of cypress wood, make rooms in it, and coat it with pitch inside and out. This is how you're going to build it. The ark is to be 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high. Make a roof for it and finish the ark to within 18 inches of the top. Put a door in the side of the ark and make lower, middle, and upper decks. I'm going to bring flood waters on the earth and destroy all life under heaven. Every creature that has the breath of life in it. Everything on earth will perish. But I will establish my covenant with you, and you will enter the ark, you and your sons and your wife and your sons' wives with you. You are to bring into the ark 2 of all living creatures, male and female, to keep them alive with you. 2 of every kind of bird, of every kind of animal, and every kind of creature that moves along the ground will come to you and be kept alive. You are to take every kind of food that is to be eaten and stored away as food for you and for them. Okay, Noah did everything just as God commanded him. All right, let's stop there. That's the end of chapter 6. So I want to talk about Noah here now. Now, we talked about the number 6 and all that, and let's talk about Noah, though, because Noah is seen as righteous by God, blameless among the people of his time, because he walked with God. So God is saying, hey, I'm gonna destroy the earth, but I'm gonna keep you because I'm gonna set my new covenant with you because you're righteous. And so God gives him plans on how to build this thing. Now, as you heard earlier when I said that his days will be 120 years, meaning man's days, God gives Noah basically 120 years to build this ark. So he's building this ark for 120 years, but it's huge, and he's by himself, and everything's hand done, right? And he's by himself building it. So what's amazing to me is it says at the end of chapter 6, Noah did everything just as God commanded him. And think about it. As we're going to see in another chapter here, people are obviously making fun of Noah for what he is about to do. They're going to be making fun of him here. But he did everything just as God commanded him. Now, think about it. So if you got this message from God and God said, hey, I'm going to wipe out the earth. I'm going to make it rain. And, I'm going to flood this whole earth. And I'm going to save you. But I need you to make this ark. I need you to make it, this wide, this tall, this big. And I want you to take all these animals with you so I can save some of these, the remnant, some of the animals and the people. We can start over and the covenant will be with you now. And so what do you think Noah was thinking? First off, it hadn't rained. There was no indication in the Bible that it had rained yet until the flood. So Noah's building this boat because of this flood, all these rains that are going to come, and yet it has never rained on the earth. It hasn't rained. So, he's thinking like, wait a minute here. Because he couldn't have understood everything, right? Just like when God tells us to do things, we don't understand everything he says, but he says it and, and that's how it is. Well, in this case, Noah is got this huge calling from God, and it is unbelievable. And it has never rained before, but God said it's going to rain. So he doesn't even know what that means, really. He just knows, okay, water is going to come and I got to build this boat. And so he's doing it for 120 years. And so I love the fact that Noah did everything just as God commanded him. I wish I could do everything that God commanded me. But man, I fall into, just my fleshliness. Again, the number 6. So let's go back to that. The number 6 and the fleshliness of the 6 and the number of man and our human nature. So in Revelation 13, verse 18, it says this, quote, "This calls for wisdom. If anyone has insight, let him calculate the number of the beast, for it is man's number. This number is 666. Okay, so that's in Revelation where John is basically revealing the fact that God's, talking about the end of the world there, the end of days. That's it. That's where his wrath is coming now, right? The woes are coming. And so in this portion, he's talking about the beast and how the beast is going to rise up and all this stuff. And here, and where this is where the money thing is, where you can't buy or sell. You can't buy or sell without the mark of the beast, right? And so God says right here that the number of the beast, for it is man's number, is the number 666. Okay, so the number 6 is the number of man. Now, interesting enough, the number 3, which we should talk about in another episode, the number 3 is the number of unity. Well, you've got 3 6s here. It kind of represents the unity of man against God, right? And the number 3 is unity of the 3 6s. So man, 3 different times, basically, right? So it's the unity of man against God. And this is where, in Revelation, where God talks about the men of the earth are going to unite to fight against God. Okay? And he kills the 2 witnesses, the witnesses I talked about in the other episode. And the beast is the culmination of that. He represents the system, the earthly thinking, how man unites against and sins against God. Right? And that's full of wickedness and full of sin and fleshliness and spiritlessness, right? They don't have the spirit. It's just human nature. That's all that is. So that's, again, an awesome kind of representation there, a display of the number 6, where God is pointing to the number 6 being the number of man. And in Revelation 6:6 is the unity of man against God to the ultimate, where God is going to wipe them out because of that. So there you go. There's the number 6, and that is Noah and how he is following God's plan. And we'll get to see more, hopefully. We'll take a look at other numbers and other chapters here in Genesis to go over the other numbers we want to talk about. Like I want to talk about number 7, number 8, but it still relates to Noah. So anyways, thanks for listening up, and I appreciate you coming by. My name is Clint Armitage. This is the Liberty Podcast, and I'm going to ask you to support this podcast by going to our website and purchasing a t-shirt. Those t-shirts are available, and you can make a purchase, and they relate to these different podcasts, and I'll be creating some more t-shirts that'll go along with the t-shirts that are already up there from past episodes. So anyways, thanks for coming by, and I want you to stay safe, stay motivated, and keep seeking liberty. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Liberty Podcast with Clint Armitage. If you want to get in touch, email us at info@clintarmitage.com.